I would like to thank the Institute of Food Science and Technology for this opportunity for presenting this important topic, variety registration opportunities in the forestry sector. So until now, you must have been hearing so much about the forest genetic resources, how it is to be conserved, how it is to be protected, what are the different strategies that have to be done. So this is one talk where we will be talking about the IP protection for the plants in the forestry sector, which has been it is still in its infancy. A lot of work is still going on in it. And then we felt that there is a need for the practicing foresters to know how exactly to protect the IPs, hence this particular talk. While talking about the forest genetic resources, there must have been talks on the tree improvement activities in the country, which started as early as 1950s. So presently, we have various tree improvement programs in the country. Almost 145 species we have tree improvement programs. We have tree improvement trials for 134 species, and we have seed orchards for 58 species. Why I mention these is many of the reproductive materials, be it seeds or be it propagules, come from these seed orchards and from the various vegetative multiplication gardens. Many new varieties are being evolved. These are being exchanged throughout the country, within the country. There are no export of this material, but a lot of material is being exchanged, but there is no track of what is being done, what is being exchanged, where it is going, how it is going, and so on. So here in this talk, we will be looking into how exactly this has to be handled and how we will get protection for our material to claim rights on what we have actually developed. Just a brief on how much of clonal repositories we have. These are materials that are available with the state forest departments. So if you take a look at it, the number of clonal repositories that we have, if we have to register a variety, it could be either, like I mentioned earlier, a reproductive material that is a seed or a clonal propagule. So if you look at this, vast number of clonal repositories are available with different forest departments. However, we have not been in a position to obtain IPs for all these things. Why is it so? Despite having so much of tree improvement programs and having so much of orchards and provenance trials and so on with us, we are not able to protect the material. Why do we have problems? One aspect where we have been facing problems are because we are more focused to the exotics that come from a very narrow genetic base, just a handful of material. And so for us, handling that material becomes very, very easy. We do not need to look into the vastness in the material, unlike the native forestry species. And so these exotics, we can shift them from one generation to the other. Currently, we have species like casuarina, which has reached the third generation. We have species like eucalyptus, which has reached the second generation. However, when you take the case of native forestry species, you find that these are still in its infancy. We have not been able to meddle with native forestry species the way we've been able to meddle with the exotics. And because of that, we are not able to move to different generations. Most of the species where we do the tree improvement programs, it is in the first generation only. We have not been able to understand the performance of the species across generations. The next problem is the fertility difference that exists between the trees. When we bring together different genetic material, we find that there is a lot of fertility difference between the material that we are handling. This has been brought out through literature in different species like teak, in acacias, eucalypts, casuarinas, where in an orchard we have fertility differences, because of which whatever seed comes out of that is skewed to a particular genotype, and it is not a mix of all the material that is available there. Another major problem which we face in the native trees is non-synchronous flowering. An example for this is Melina arborea. In the northeast, the material flowers and fruits at a particular time, and in the southern part of India, it flowers and fruits at a particular time. So when you bring this germplasm together, you find that there is no synchrony in flowering, because of which the mixing of material does not happen, the gene flow does not happen. Poor seed set is another problem in native tree species, like in teak, where we have aborted seeds, unfilled seeds. In the case of Melia, you have aborted seeds, unfilled seeds. So this is another issue which we are forced to tackle. And the last one is the gene loss with each successive generation. Because of issues of fertility differences, non-synchronous flowering, and poor seed set, whatever material we get, we have very limited gene pool. And when it gets passed through different generations, there is a terrible gene loss. So these are some of the basic problems that we handle when we go in for tree domestication. However, despite all these things, we have been trying to keep pace with whatever is happening at the global level. We have been trying to bring in different legal instruments to see if we can provide an IP for our tree genetic resources. So there are three major legal instruments which we are trying to implement in our country. The first one is seed certification in forestry, which through the IDPS PTI, that is the Indo-Danish project on seed procurement and tree improvement, which was started in 1979, but it was abandoned midway. We have the OECD scheme, which was implemented in 1974 globally. That is the Organization for Economic and Commercial Development. This was implemented globally. In 2007, they tried to rope in India. There are 36 to 40 countries which are a part of this OECD scheme. This is specifically for forestry seeds, where they try to bring in certification schemes for forestry. However, India has not been a party to it. If we are able to be a party to this thing, I am sure whatever seeds come out later on from our orchards or our plantations would be certified seeds, and our tree growers would be ensured of quality material, certified material, when they go in for large scale plantation and for further use of their material. The second legal instrument that we have is the Protection of Plant Varieties and the Farmers' Rights Act in 2001, which was developed based on the TRIPS and the UPOV, the International Union for Plant Protection of Varieties. And the third one that we have for protecting the tree genetic resources is the Guidelines for Testing and Releasing of Tree Varieties and Clones, which was promulgated by the ICFR in 2008. So I will be touching upon these three legal instruments and how they can offer protection to our legal protection to our tree genetic resources. So here we will be mostly looking into the FRM, that is the forest reproductive material, which comprises the seeds, parts of plants, and the plants. So these are the three that we will be handling. Under seed certification, we will be looking into mostly the seeds. Then in the ppvfr and in the ICFR guidelines, we will be looking into the parts of the plants and the plants. So first, coming to the seed. Seed supply in our country, we do not have sufficient information, mainly because we are not aware of the status of our parent trees. It is mostly from plantations, seed stands. We do not know when most of these trees were planted, what is the age of the tree, what is the bearing capacity of the mother trees. So that information is lacking, is the first issue. The second one is a lack of consistency or uniformity in its performance. This year, I would be able to get large quantities of seeds, but next year, I might not be able to get the same quantity of seed. This year, my seeds, the filling would be poor. Next year, my filling would be better. So I am not able to assure to the seed supplier that I will be able to provide this quality seed for you every year for sale. Standards for seed collection. There are so many manuals explaining how exactly seed collection is to be done. For some species, you are not expected to climb and collect from the tree. The seeds have to fall on the ground and you have to make collections. In some cases, you have to collect the seeds before it matures so that no damage happens when it falls down. However, when we go for seed collections, invariably we find that most of these standards are not followed. We just go collect the material and then come back. Though we may say that yes, we are following seed collection, as practicing foresters and as researchers, we know to what extent we follow these standards. The fourth point, which is gaining a lot of importance today, is identification of seeds which are suitable to a target site. Today, with the NDCs for 2030 fixed, and then we have the Green India Mission, we have large-scale plantations, we have forest landscape restoration coming up in a big way. This is a very important aspect because we need to identify what is the seed that is suitable for a particular site. For example, I have to restore a land in Gujarat. The easy advice that is given is just take the local material, raise a nursery there, and do a restoration activity there. But what is the diversity that you have in the material that you are going to plant there? Is the material diverse enough to support the next generation or the seeds that will be produced from there? Can I shift seeds from South India to Gujarat? If it is so, is that seed able to adapt itself to that place? Is the seed suitable for that site? will it be able to give that a substantial increase in the diversity over whatever is existing in Gujarat? So this sort of information is not available with us, where we are not able to tell this seed for this site, or this seed can be shifted from this area to another area. Finally, the most important issue which we have as far as tree seed supply is concerned is we are not able to tell what is the actual genetic gain that is obtained by planting a particular set of seeds. Say dandeli teak. I have seeds of dandeli teak. I would like to plant them in Tamil Nadu. Now, if I ask someone what is the gain I will get by planting dandeli teak over what I actually have, the local teak, nobody is able to give me that information. Is it 5% gain, or is it 10% gain, or is it no gain? It is not a seed suitable for the site. I don't have that information. So we find that a lot of this information is lacking. If we are going for certifying our material, if we are going for developing standards for our material, these are some of the information we need to have with us. Only then we can very boldly say that yes, our material is good, our material can be certified, our material is qualified. We can go in for IP issues for our material. This is regarding the material, the tree genetic resources as a biological material, and to a certain extent, the manpower who is handling the material. What are the other impediments as far as seed certification in forestry is concerned? The main impediment, I would say, is lack of scientific awareness for the need for seed certification, and also the push from the political side. If we are to enforce that we have to use only certified seeds and no other seeds will be used for any of the planting programs in the states or in the country as a whole, say there are CAMPA projects, and in the CAMPA projects, if there is a regulation, there is a rule that only certified seeds should be used for the planting, then I am sure at least 2 to 3% improvement over the already existing material would come. That way, an awareness on the importance of certified seeds or identified seeds would come in. The second major drawback is the lack of resources. This would be either both financial resources as well as trained manpower. The person who goes to collect the seed may not know how to do it, whereas the person who is actually asking him to collect the seed would be aware of how it is to be done. But this knowledge is not translated it is not transcribed to the person, as a result of which it is not translated in the field, and so what we get is not good material. So there is a need for creating an awareness on the need for this material. Skill development is also required in this process. The next issue is the complexity of the genetic structure. Being cross-pollinated crops, whatever material that we get, not necessary that this would perform the same as the mother plant. And so there again, we have issues when we go for certification. And to top it all, we do not have an acceptable system for evaluation and documentation. This becomes important when we are exchanging germplasm with other countries. There are very many countries who are interested in our seeds. For example, teak. If you take the case of teak, a lot of material has gone from Nilambur to places like Malaysia and Thailand, where they have done tree improvement programs, and now that material has been distributed by them throughout the world. Because we did not have a proper seed certification system, some of our material got spilled into those nations and they are able to use our resources, whereas we have not been able to do that. If we have an internationally acceptable system of evaluation and documentation, I am sure we will be able to tell the world the quality of our material and also encourage them to take our seeds. The only time where this was emphasized, I believe, was during the international provenance trials, where a set of regulations were given how to handle the seeds, how to process them, how to lay out trials. So that was one exercise where India participated, and it was quite successful also. So with that success, I am sure that if we are able to go in a very methodical and systematic manner, seed certification in forestry should not be an issue. We can start with small species with limited distributions, like maybe Pterocarpus santillanus, a species which has a very limited distribution. You look at the quality of seeds that come out of it, see how you are able to grade them, how you are able to fix the different qualities for it, and try selling it. Once we start with a species like that and we are able to gain success in that, we also gain confidence that we can slowly extend it to the other species with better distribution. An example of what was told in the OECD scheme, which India failed to implement. Though we did try, we have tried to replicate this in the FRM bill of 2008. A forest reproductive material bill was developed in 2008, but the bill is still pending. So that was prepared based on the OECD scheme. So maybe if we can move that bill forward, we would be able to do seed certification in forestry. So what does this scheme tell? The scheme divides the seeds that we have in our country into 4 different sources, not here globally. We have a source identified seed, we have a selected seed, qualified seeds, and tested seeds. Now these seeds can come from seed stands, plantations, seed orchards, parents of families, that is the provenance trials, and clonal trials or clonal mixture trials. So the OECD has tried to bring in all different possible combinations of forestry trials and tried to use them as material from where we get seeds and we can try and certify it. A small explanation of what all these 4 types of seeds are. So the first one is a source identified seed. In a source identified seed, you are not going in for any phenotypic selection. You just identify a stand, a stand which has been regularly producing seed, which has not caused any problems over a period of years, where it is consistent in its production. From that stand, if you are able to get seeds regularly, you can call that as a source identified seed, and then you can sell it. So that is one way of certifying the material that you have. The second one is selected seeds. Now in that seed stand, if you find that some individuals are producing profusely, or the seeds that come from that particular individual tree, it has good germination, the vigor is good, mark those trees and regularly start collecting only from those trees. So those become phenotypically selected trees at a population level, and whatever seeds you get from that, those become selected seeds. So that is the second level of certification of seeds that you can give. The third one is the qualified seeds. In qualified seeds, what we do is we try to bring germplasm together, different genotypes together, allow them to mix, and then we collect the seeds from that. Since it has been identified at the individual level and then you put them together, there is scope for evaluation of the material. Even if you have not evaluated it, it is okay, because the material that you have brought in has undergone one round of selection. So whatever seeds you get from plantations of known sources or seed orchards, provenance trials, or the clonal mixtures, they come under the qualified seeds category. So that way we can shift it to category 3. And the final one is the tested seeds, where you know the genetic superiority of the material. Either genetic superiority or its superiority, comparing it with a locally available material or a commercially available material. Once you are able to prove its superiority, then it becomes a tested material. That way, depending on the different categories from 1 to 4, we can certify the seeds and accordingly fix rates for our seeds. The moment rates are fixed for these certified seeds, then automatically the buyers realize the value of the seeds, and maybe we can also slowly push in the concept of certification. So this is one area where the research organizations and the forest departments can try and adopt at the first level, so that as we are able to find success in this, we can go ahead smoothly with the seed certification in forestry. And hopefully if the FRM bill of 2008 sees the light of the day, then we will be able to successfully implement seed certification in forestry. So this is about seed certification. Now we move into plant variety registration. As we all know, live plants cannot be patented. So when we cannot patent the live plants, there is an issue. There has been an issue in our country that, being an agricultural country, we have lots of plants which have been generated by farmers, exclusive to the farmers. They have complete rights on that, but we lose the IP on those plants because we do not have a means to protect them. So when this issue arose, the Ministry of Agriculture decided that we have to bring in an alternative for patents, especially for plants, and that is when the plant variety registration started taking shape. So initially it was the UPOV, that is the International Union for Protection of Varieties, which was forcing India to be a part of their organization. But India felt that because we have farmers who are the main holders of the land races, the communities of the gentry groups, the communities hold the genetic resources. So it is not that we directly go by what UPO has stated, where they only consider the rights of the breeder or the researcher. So the Ministry of Agriculture adopted a unique system, a sui generis system for plant variety protection. So that was enacted as the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act, and it is the first of its kind in the world. Maybe it is the only act in the world which takes into consideration the rights of the farmers. And now many of the tropical countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, they are very interested in knowing about what this is. Malaysia, they found it very difficult to follow what India was doing, because we had defined farmers varieties, we had defined community varieties, we had defined traditional varieties, which was missing in Malaysia. So finally Malaysia agreed to the UPO, but there are places like Indonesia, Timor-Leste, where they are interested in the ppvfr for the protection of rights of the farmers. So this is one place where India is unique when compared to all other countries in the world. So what does the ppvfr say? What are the objectives of the ppvfr? So there are 4 objectives of the ppvfr. The first is protection of the varieties, the rights of the farmers and the plant breeders. So it believes that once the varieties are protected, their rights are protected, it will encourage them to go in for the development of newer varieties. The second is to recognize that farmers have been protecting our wild relatives. Farmers have been protecting many of our traditional varieties. So we recognize them, we help them in conserving, improving, making available these genetic resources and facilitate them to further develop newer varieties. The third objective is to support research and development of newer varieties so that we can accelerate development in the agricultural sector in the country. And the fourth is to facilitate the growth of the seed industry in the country so that we have good quality seeds and planting material to the farmers. I will explain this in detail as to why this particular point was brought here in the ppvfr Act later when I talk about compulsory licensing. So what are the things that the ppvfr looks into? It looks into mainly the 4 different rights. That is the breeder's right, the person who generates the variety through his research, the breeder's rights, the researcher's right, a researcher who uses the material produced by the breeder for further breeding a crop. That's the researcher's right. A farmer who has been safeguarding a particular crop or a variety or a land race. The community rights, where a community protects a particular crop or a land race or a wild variety. So these 4 rights are protected by the authority. They also have a gene fund and they give recognition awards to those farmers who are involved in the protection of traditional knowledge, traditional varieties and land races. They play a key role in compulsory license, wherein a variety is released. It has to come into the market. It cannot rest with the breeder or with the researcher. They ensure that, and they also ensure benefit sharing. Say a breeder has taken a material from a farmer and he has improved it, like in the case of Navara rice, which is a traditional variety and then which has been bred to enhance the quality of Navara rice, then the benefits will flow into the community from the breeder, from whatever benefits he gets. So looking into these aspects is done by different components of the ppvfr. The first one is the DUS Center. Different institutes, organizations are identified by the authority as legal entities, small legal entities under the authority, who will look into different crops. Any issues related to the crop or a variety will be dealt with by a particular DUS center which has been designated. The DUS center can also have sub-centers. For example, IFGTB is the DUS center for eucalyptus, but eucalyptus is grown throughout the country. So we have FRI Dehradun as another sub-center of the DUS center, so that the material from the north is handled by FRI, and we at IFGTB handle material in the south. The ppvfr looks into National Gene Bank and a Field Gene Bank, where they have common gene banks. They pool material, like the forestry crops are put together in one place, the plantation crops are put together in one place, medicinal and aromatic plants are put together in one place. For cereals, they have 2 to 3 field gene banks, 2 to 3 national gene banks, and so on. So the ppvfr looks into the functioning of these. It has an appellate tribunal which looks into cases, infringements, penalties, etc. it also looks into import and export of germplasm. Say I would like to have a variety of rice which I would like to import from IRRI and then work on it. Then such things are also looked into by the ppvfr. And the authority has a plant variety journal wherein whatever activities related to IP of the different crops happen, that is published in the plant variety journal. Complete information is available in the journal, and it regularly updates on how many varieties have been developed, how many descriptors have been developed, how many, sir, how many varieties have been developed. Sorry, how many varieties, how many centers have been developed, how many crops have been notified, how many new varieties have been declared, and so on. So we will look into a little bit more about the ppvfr, because this is one important aspect where forestry can enter and play a key role for IP of our tree genetic resources. So what is a variety? What do they define by the term variety? There are three important aspects which you have to consider when you are calling a particular genotype as a variety. The first thing is it should have a set of morphological characters which is unique to that genotype, and that character should be distinguished from other genotypes of a particular species. Let us say, take the case of Tectona grandis. I have Tectona grandis which has a clean bole. There are no scars on it as a result of the falling of the branches. Now, this is, I say, is unique because no other genotype which I have with me has this unique character. It is clean. There are no scars on it. So that way, I have a genotype with no scars, and I am able to distinguish it from the other genotypes that I have in my collection. And whenever I propagate this material, all the propagules that I have, all the clones that I have should also be scarless. If I am able to satisfy these three things, then this particular genotype I can call as my variety. So when I have identified my varieties, I can group them into five different categories. The first one is a novel category. That is something which I am developing new. The second is an extant category. Under the extant category, it is something which is available in the public domain. It is a variety of common knowledge, or it has already been released. It is being sold, and then I want to have that registered with the ppvfr. That is an extant variety. There are farmers varieties which the farmers evolved through their different practices, and essentially derived varieties, which is akin to a hybrid, where I take a variety which has been registered and then I develop a new one out of that. Like I was mentioning the clean bole teak tree which I have. So I have this tree which is which has 4 meters of clean bole. Now I want to use that and make it into 5 meters or 6 meters of clean bole. So I use a variety which is already existing and then I improve upon that. That becomes an essentially derived variety. The final one is the transgenic variety, where you do molecular manipulations and then you develop a variety. So varieties fall into two categories. They can be either registered or they can be protected. The first four can be registered. The blue ones can be registered, whereas the transgenic variety can only be protected. It cannot be registered because you're doing a molecular manipulation. You cannot register it. You can only protect it. Now this has been marked in red. This again I shall explain as and when I move into later on. When I am discussing further, I will explain about this thing. So who can apply for this variety registration? Breeders. Breeder, the person who claims to have bred the variety, who is a successor of the breeder, or if the breeder assigns his variety to another person. Like I have a project, I am running I am running a tree improvement program of eucalyptus. I have developed a variety, so I can apply, telling that I have registered. Now I am retiring. I hand over my entire research to another person who takes over the breeding from that. He becomes my successor. So he will also be able to apply the same material. Or if I am assigning somebody else, telling that now I am through with eucalyptus, I want to work on teak, then when I assign it to another person, then that person is also eligible to apply. Among farmers, it can be either an individual farmer, it can be a group of farmers or a community of farmers who can claim to be a breeder of variety. This is mostly for the land races, for the wild relatives, or for the traditional varieties. So any of the persons who are authorized in these 4 cases can apply. In addition to that, universities or publicly funded agricultural institutions, forestry institutions who claim to be breeders of the variety can apply for registration. Now coming to the process of registration, what is important when you want to register a variety once you have it in hand? You have to have 3 important things in your kitty when you want to say that your variety is ready for registration. They are the distinctiveness, uniformity, and stability. So distinctiveness, as I mentioned earlier, it should be clearly distinguishable. Like here you see hibiscus, you have 4, all the 4 are clearly distinguishable. Now these 4 are eucalyptus hybrids. So you see the bark, which is clearly distinguishable in all the 4 varieties. And then uniformity. This is teak which has been planted in a farmer's field. If I say that the clean bole of this teak is 4 meters, it should be constantly 4 meters throughout. It should not change. So that is uniformity. And then stability, I multiply it, I plant it in different locations. If it is able to show the same 4 meters, then that means my material is also stable across locations, across growing seasons, across locations also. Now here, because it is forestry crops, they give a margin of plus or minus 1% error, because forestry crops being cross-pollinated, there is definitely chance for error. Though it is clonal material, depending upon from where the tissue was taken, what part, what time, there could be some amount of variation. So that is accounted for in the plus or minus 1 to 2% error. So now that I prove my variety is distinct, uniform, and stable, that is in short called as DUS. Once that is ready, then I go for the process of registration. So how does the process of registration start? Now I feel that my species is economically very important. I'll take the case of teak again here, because forestry, our favorite species is teak. So I feel teak is very important economically. Now I want to go in for the process of registration. So it starts from development of descriptors for the species. So the first job is the organization, the institute applies to the authority telling we would like to develop descriptors and does testing guidelines for teak. So the authority examines the species, and then they commission the institute to take up the work on descriptor development and guidelines development. Now for the development of the descriptors, we go around the natural distribution. These do not fall under the National Biodiversity Act. So we go around looking into the different variations that exist, the morphological variations that exist. We record all the morphological variations and we bring in ranges as to what are the different variations that we can see and what are the ranges that they fit into. Like it could be the stem, whether it is a circular stem, whether it is a rectangular stem, what is the branching pattern, what is the clean bole, what is the angle at which the branches are formed, what is the leaf, all the botanical descriptions that you can have for a crop species will be brought in there. Once the descriptors and the dust testing guidelines, that is how exactly should you test this material to know if it is unique, you draw up the guidelines also. Once the entire thing is ready, you tell the authority that yes, now I'm ready with this material. I would like to register this for notification as a crop where you can register. Then the authority, it arranges for a task force. The task force will look into all the aspects that are presented there as descriptors and the dust test guidelines. Once the task force is satisfied that all the descriptors have come into play, then they host this on their site and wait for 1 year for public comments on whether everything has been included. Do we retain something? Do we remove something? So after 1 year, when public comments are received for this, those are incorporated. At the end of 1 year, if this authority is satisfied, then it comes out with a gazette notification that dust descriptors and dust testing guidelines have been notified for Tectona grandis. Once that is done, then I am ready to now register my tree with the authority. So now I have my Tectona grandis clone, which is clean bold of 4 meters and no scar. I want to register this. So the moment I have this with me, I tell to the authority, I am ready now. So the authority asks me to apply. In the case of agricultural crops, because they mostly handle seeds, the seeds are sent to the authority or the seeds are sent to the center. Now that I have developed the descriptors and the dust testing guidelines, my institute becomes the dust center for registration of for facilitating the registration of the crop. So the seeds are sent either to the center or the planting material is sent to the center or the planting material is sent to the authority itself and the authority sends it to the center. In the case of forestry crops, what happens? We cannot send the propagules to the organization, or I would have planted it someplace, or I would have it with me. Now shifting that material becomes difficult, and being a long gestation crop, these are issues that we have. So when forestry sector was brought into ppvfr, trying to incorporate it into ppvfr, we brought in a concept of on-site testing. That is, I plant my clones in a place in 2 or 3 locations, and then I tell them, my plants are in the field, please come see them and then help me to register. So once I submit my application, they check into whether these characteristics are unique or not. Are there varieties which are already existing, which have a clean bowl, 4-meter clean bowl, or scarless? And then if it is available, they reject it. If it is not available, they accept my application and they allow me to go for the dust testing. I pay the fees for the dust testing, and then a team is formed by the authority, which includes members from the authority as well as the dust testing center. They come to my field, they test for 2 locations for 2 growing seasons. If it is a new variety, if it is already existing in the field, then it is only for 1 growing season and at 2 locations. So they check whether the data matches with whatever I have told, and once the data matches, they send the information back to the authority. The authority accepts it and then again publishes it in the plant variety journal, asking the public whether anybody has such a variety, or was it developed by somebody else? Are there any claims? Is this a false claim? So they wait for 90 days, and up to 90 days, if there are no rejections or if there are no oppositions to it, then the authority will grant me the certificate telling that this is my exclusive variety and now I can hold the IP rights on it. Now, in the case of tree species, if it is an extant variety, that is, it is already existing, 15 years protection is given to me. If it is a new variety, I get 18 years of protection. That is, I can give my variety and then I can receive money whenever somebody uses my variety. And at the end of 15 or 18 years, depending on the case, it will automatically be surrendered or it can be revoked. Now, here is where compulsory licensing or the benefit sharing and the denomination altering comes. Now I have this variety. I don't want to share this variety with anyone. For the next 18 years, I want to keep selling this variety and minting money out of it. Farmers feel that this is a good variety. If they sell it, they are going to get very good revenue. In such cases, a farmer can approach the authority and tell the authority that so-and-so has this variety. We feel it will be good for us, but she is not handing it over to us. They ask the authority to release the variety. In such case, me as a breeder, I will have to hand over this variety to a licensee, ask him to multiply and give it to the farmers, whoever is interested in growing. So that is one way the authority ensures that whatever is developed in the lab or by research organizations or by private agencies, especially when you have companies where they produce seeds and they are charging exorbitantly and they are not ready to give it to the farmers, this tag of compulsory licensing comes in, wherein the industry is forced to license it out so that farmers are benefited. So what are the different rights that are there under the ppvfr Act? The first one is the breeder's right. Like I mentioned, I am the breeder. I have the right to produce, sell, market, import or export my protected variety. I can also license out my variety to a licensee, ask him to multiply, and then I get a royalty from it and he is free to sell my material. Researchers' rights. I have developed a variety. My colleague wants to use it to further improve on that variety. In that case, if he is able to earn something out of it, or if he is getting credits out of that, I also have the right to share the credits, whatever he has taken out of that. The most important thing is the farmer's rights, where the farmer who has evolved or developed a new variety, he has complete right for registering and protecting this variety, just like a researcher. Only thing is, he does not have to pay anything. He can register a new variety as well as an extant variety which is already existing in the market. An advantage for farmers in the ppvfr Act is that they can use all the varieties that they have been handling for a long time, since generations prior to the Act. That is, whatever varieties have not been brought under the Act after 2001, whatever varieties they have been handling, they can continue to handle that. They do not need to protect it. They just have to inform that it is our variety and we will be continuing to use it. But in case they are using a branded variety, then they cannot use it freely. But whatever is theirs, like the traditional varieties or the local varieties or the wild varieties, that they can use it. The ppvfr allows them to use it. They do not have to pay anything. They are complete owners of that variety. In addition to this, farmers, like I mentioned earlier, they are also eligible for recognition and rewards, so that this is sort of an encouragement for them to protect their resources. Like in Orissa, you have different varieties of rice which are protected. You have basmati traditional varieties which are protected. You have the traditional Navra rice, a medicinal variety which is protected. You have so these are varieties which the ppvfr encourages for protection, and they give the farmers the money for the protection. They give them awards for protecting it. So these are some of the advantages that the farmers have. And again, if the farmer is giving a variety, say the basmati variety, telling that this is my traditional variety, please cultivate it, and if it is not performing well, we cannot prosecute the farmer telling that, or we cannot claim compensation from the farmer telling that your variety has not performed properly. The farmer has the benefit of doubt here. We cannot file a case against him. Farmer will not have to pay any fees. He is paid of it. It was because of these things that the ppvfr became very popular in India. So as I mentioned earlier, 18 years for a new variety in tree crops and 15 years for an already existing variety in forestry. This slide is just to show how many varieties have been registered with the ppvfr. So if you look at this graph, you can see this is up to July 2021. They have registered around 3,000 certificates. They have issued 3,000 certificates for cereal crops, 450 for fiber crops, 240 for legumes, and 287 for oilseeds. Forestry is sadly lacking in this category. Some of the reasons why forestry, though we have been trying to push in forestry crops, some of the reasons why forestry has not been able to gain so much of visibility could be because agricultural crops are annual or biennial. Forestry crops are perennial in nature. Initially, the dust testing, like I mentioned, seeds go to the authority or to the dust center, and then it was done. It took us some time to bring in the concept of on-site testing. ppvfr was introduced in 2001. In 2006, forestry crops were introduced to the authority, telling that we also have been developing varieties like in rubber, in the case of casuarinas, eucalyptus, then in poplars where we have clones, we have been able to develop varieties. So we had to convince the authority that we are doing this, but we cannot give the material. So we would require an on-site testing. So after convincing, I think from 2016 to 2006 to 2013, we had to continuously explain to the authorities that forestry has to be handled in a different manner. And so we could bring in the concept of on-site testing. And in agriculture, it is a true two cropping season. They were very particular that it should be in 2 seasons. So we suggested 2 growing seasons, maybe 2 consecutive years, where we can prove the uniformity and the stability of the crop. So in addition to these 3 practical problems in the field in relation to dust testing, We also have other problems like high variability for the morphological characters. So not necessary that these morphological characters which are expressed in one site are going to be expressed in another site. So that is an issue which we have been facing, mainly because they are cross-pollinated crops and because it is not a single gene control trait, they are mostly polygene control trait. But when in the authority, they started bringing in crops like jamun, jackfruit, walnut, and so on, then they started realizing that, okay, we have to identify ways and means to bring in forestry crops also. So that way, we have been able to bring in more of forestry crops now, but still we are in the infancy only. Out of 161 crops that have been notified for registration, only 9 of them are forestry crops. So this is a list of 9 crops which have come into the authority, and guidelines are being prepared for ailanthus, teak, and bamboos. Many of the crops like we have eagle mallows, we have tamarind, we have syzygium, we have walnut. All those have gone into the horticultural crops. So we missed out on all those crops. Some have gone into the medicinal and aromatic category, and some have gone into the horticultural category. Some have gone into the cash crop category. So we have missed out on many of those, but still there is scope for many of the forestry crops to enter into this area. And this is one of the safe areas. I'll explain why in the coming slides. So here we have been able to register 6 Casuarina variety clones, 1 eucalyptus clone and 1 neem. This neem is actually an extant variety. The neem that has been registered here is the neem tree that is available in the Shirdi temple, in Sai Baba temple in Shirdi, where there is a neem tree. There was an issue with that tree that it was dying, but it revived a very old tree which has been revered by all the devotees there. So they felt the need to register this as a variety of common knowledge, and that is how this particular neem tree has been registered with the authority. Now this is an example where I will explain how this could have been an essentially derived variety, but now it becomes just a novel variety. So the institute has been working on Casuarinas. We brought in material seeds from Australia, which is the native of Casuarinas. This is Casuarina junguniana, which is a pure species. We laid out provenance trials. We identified good material, persistently good performing material. We developed clones from that. A clone CJ9 was developed. And then in 2010, because we did not have our guidelines and the descriptors ready, we released it to the public in 2010. So we could not register it as a variety with the ppvfr. So this no longer remains a novel variety. It became a variety in public domain. The rule for an extant variety is within 3 years of releasing it into the public domain, it has to be registered. But within 3 years also, we could not bring in the descriptors. So this became a common material available for everybody in public. So this was just a commonly available material. The only thing was we had bred this variety. Next, in 2017, we brought out a hybrid for which this particular plant was used as the mother plant. So we developed a hybrid clone, and this one we released it and also registered it, because we said we are the initial breeders of this material. Now we have developed a novel variety. So this was only registered as a novel variety and not as an essentially derived variety, because we could not register the first one. So this becomes a novel variety and not an essentially derived variety. The characteristics which we used for proving this were the fast growth, straight stem, smooth and thin bark, and higher pulping yield. So when we register, we have to prove that these are the traits over which over the existing varieties or the commercial varieties, and based on this, the authority will help us to register our material. Now, these are some of the forestry species which I have listed here, which have good potential for registration. So we need to concentrate on bringing in more of these species into the authorities notice, so that more forestry crops come in. We are able to generate IPs for the tree genetic resources. That way, we will be able to protect most of our genetic resources, which we improve through various tree improvement programs. So this is about the ppvfr Act. Now we move into the ICFRA guidelines that were developed for the release of material. As I was mentioning earlier, we had released Casuarina varieties in 2010. So we had been doing these tree improvement programs for a long time. So it was felt that we have developed a lot of varieties. This is going to the farmers. The farmers are really appreciating this. So why don't we go in for identifying specific varieties and then releasing them in a methodical manner. I had showed in red earlier about the Seeds Act. Varieties which have been notified under the Seed Act can directly enter into the ppvfr and we can get a registration. Now what happened in the case of forestry? In Seed Act, they had mentioned only agriculture and horticulture. So only agricultural crops and horticultural crops could be notified by the Ministry of Agriculture. Forestry crops could not be notified by the Ministry of Agriculture because the term forestry was missing. ICFRA tried its level best to interact with the Agricultural Ministry to somehow find ways and means to get it notified by the Agriculture Ministry. The process of notification is bringing in a gazette notification that a particular variety is available in the country or available in the region for the farmers to take it up. But the Agriculture Ministry was not ready to take it up because we did not have a systematic release program. So when this happened, then ICFRA developed this systematic release program on the parlance of the ICAR so that we can gain entry into the ICAR system and then bring in a gazette notification, recognize the forestry varieties and clones that are being released. Now the Seed Bill 2019 is in the draft stage. There they have included the term forestry. So once the Seed Bill 2019 comes in, it will be easy for us to now release our material. So whatever comes after the Seed Bill, we can do it comfortably. But until then, forestry crops will have to follow this guidelines. If you are not having a notified crop, like in case I want to release a Thespesia variety, Thespesia, we do not have the descriptors, we do not have the dust guidelines for it. So we will have to go through the ICFRA guidelines and then we will have to try to convince or find ways and means to ask the Agricultural Ministry to help us to get the gazette notification, or else we have to develop the descriptors and the dust testing guidelines, and then we will have to get our varieties notified. So I will explain how ICFRA does this process based on the ICAR guidelines. So first, as a breeder, I go around, I identify different superior genotypes, and then I put them into a performance trial. And from this performance trial, I am able to identify 5 clones, A, B, C, D, and E. Now, these 5 clones, I observe they are superior. Now, I have to test them across different locations. I go in for a regional trial in case I want to only test it in my region. So, I go in for 3 different locations where I lay them out. Once I lay them out, I lay them out with controls, with seedlings or with local varieties, and then I establish that they are superior. Once my trial is done and I am able to get sufficient data that my clones are performing well, I inform a team called the implementation team. I will explain the composition of the team later. I inform the implementation team that I have 5 varieties which I would like to release. Now this implementation team goes around into these 3 locations. It looks at the performance of the material and then they submit their report to what is called as the Regional Variety Testing Committee. Now this Regional Variety Testing Committee looks into the data and then they tell, okay, these 5 clones are performing well when compared to the other material. This can go for a release. Now, I do not want to stop my release in just a regional level. I want to go for an all India level. Then what I do, I select 3 different regions. So that way 9 different locations I plant my 5 clones, and then these 3 RVTCs, that is the Regional Variety Testing Committees, they put their data together. They present it to the All India Variety Testing Committee, which the All India Variety Testing Committee looks at the performance of the 5 clones and they decide whether it is stable across the 5 locations, whether whatever claims I have made is right. Then they say now it is ready for release. So once they say that is ready for release, it is then put up to the Variety Release Committee. The Variety Release Committee then looks into, they assess whatever has been presented. They then release they notify that 5 varieties are released. Once it is notified, then the breeder will multiply the material and go in for an extension process, thereby popularizing his material. So the initial step, if it is a regional variety testing, 3 to 4 years, and then 5 to 7 years for an all India coordinated trial. Now this is species specific depending upon whether it is a short rotation crop or a long rotation crop. So now we will look at the composition of the team. Why is the composition so very important? Now in ICAR, they have different teams which look into the crops that the agricultural universities, the state agricultural universities or the research institutions release. So the main hitch with which the Ministry of Agriculture said was, you do not have such strong teams which will assess your material and tell us. So accordingly, teams were formed. So the implementation team, which goes around to the different locations and collects data, it comprises of breeders, geneticists, people from outside ICFRE, so that there is no bias. Then geneticists within different ICFRE organizations, statisticians who will look into the robustness of the data, and also members from the state forest departments, forest development corporation, universities, or wood-based industry. Now, once this implementation team goes around and submits it to the Regional Variety Testing Committee. So the members of the Regional Variety Testing Committee comprise the chairperson, who is the director of the regional institute, the coordinator of the implementation team who will explain what has happened in the field. Then here we have two outside subject experts, mostly from the agricultural field, who understand what has happened. Then we have members from the forest department. We have from agroforestry, we have farmers who will tell whether this material will be useful for them. And then the member secretary will be the head of the genetics division or the tree breeding division of the ICFR Institute, which will look into further processes of the clones that are going to be released. Similarly, the All India Variety Testing Committee, which will look into the clones which are going for an All India release. Here, the chairperson is the Director General ICFRE. We have again member subject experts from outside MOEF. We have chairpersons of all the RVTCs, that is the regional testing committees. We have ICFRE experts and all the coordinators and implementation team members. And this will be looked into by the Director General Research of ICFRE. And the Variety Releasing Committee happens at Delhi, MOEF, where the Director General Forest will be the chairperson. The Director General of ICFRE will be the co-chairperson, and all other heads of the different committees will be members in this committee. Now, why this committee? Why these committees? Recently we had a discussion with the Ministry of Agriculture, where we once again requested them to include forestry crops into the Gazette notification. So when we presented these committees, it was then that the Ministry of Agriculture, the Joint Director Seeds, he mentioned that now the committee is robust, wherein you have experts right from the breeder up to the topmost level in the organization. Now the Ministry of Agriculture is ready to facilitate registration, Gazette notification of all the materials that we have registered. So these are some of the examples of varieties that have been registered, released by IFGTB. Now we await Gazette notification once the Ministry of Agriculture supports us. So as on 2021, we have 34 varieties released. Like I mentioned, it has been mostly exotics where we have been very comfortable. Now slowly we are trying to bring in native species. We are working on calophyllum, neem, and we have these species under testing. Some of them are native tree species, and the characters that we are promoting are mostly fast growth, stem form, and high pulp yield. One important aspect of dust testing, which we have not brought into forestry, but which is quite popular with the agricultural crops. In forestry, because the morphological descriptors are so very large, we go in by the morphological descriptors itself. But if you take the case of rice, where they have exhausted most of the morphological descriptors, they go in for special dust testing characteristics, like what is the starch content, what is the stickiness of the starch that is present, or what is the length of the grain that is produced, or what is the composition of the grain that is produced. So those are special characters that are brought into. Now high pulp yield is one special character wherein you are expected to do some analysis and then prove, some biochemical analysis and prove, that has not come into forestry because the authority feels there is sufficient variability existing in forestry. So they don't want to bring in this aspect, but they would like to go in by the morphological differences. In addition to these superior end-use characters, we are also looking into suitability in different planting environments, like adaptability to different stresses, then agroforestry systems, and tolerance to insect, pests and disease conditions. So this is about the legal instruments that we have in forestry, which we can use to protect our IPR. But what are the areas where we need to focus better? Because right now we are in a very nascent stage. We need to do quite a lot more if we have to bring forestry to the forefront. So the first thing is we need to sensitize people on the need for IP in forestry. The authority provides funding support for organizing trainings for sensitization, especially on the ppvfr and the farmers rights authority, farmers rights. So we can always ask the authority to support the forestry sector. It could be the state forest department officials, it could be the many of the people who are having traditional materials with them. It could be like the NTFPs which they have. So we could seek support from the ppvfr to support us with sensitization process and try to bring in more of indigenous tree species, develop descriptors and thus handling guidelines for forestry species. Because as of now, till such time the seed bill is not passed, we will have to use the ppvfr route for registering or for getting the IP for a forestry species. Once the seed bill is in place, then things will be a little more easier. Then we have national gene banks for different crops, like I mentioned, cereals, we have legumes. We need something specifically for forestries. That is something which we as foresters have to fight for. And then we have to have a plant variety garden where we have to try to bring in all the varieties that we develop under forestry and protect them. So thank you so much for your patient listening.